just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. But we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and, other people's success is my success and vice versa.
Because you know what? Like, the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. All right, welcome back to another episode of Truth Seekers. We have guest host jumping in today, Coach Jon Zieve. Coach, welcome.
Great to be here, Coach Josh. Excited.
Absolutely. We've talked a little bit off camera about a potential subject today, and I'm excited as well because I feel a bit uncomfortable about this subject, and I think I want to model tackling it and meeting it head on and just talking and working through how I feel, how you feel about it. And might we frame it as, what should we call it? Is it diversity, equity, and inclusion? That's a common term that I've heard that people, there's a lot of emotional charges when people think about that subject.
Right. Yeah, we could just, what I think of it as diversity and inclusion, and the equity piece, I think that's what gets people charged up. So I would prefer to just talk about equity, diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
And I think if we can tackle those two subjects, I think the equity piece solves for itself.
Love that. Okay. And maybe just one more brief frame. The reason that this came up is because, this came up in the workplace of a client of mine. And my reaction was to share our episode number 99 from Crucial Conversations. We talked about a couple other emotionally charged subjects, and we modeled how we address those, even if we might feel like we have different perspectives on that. So might we use some of the same principles that we did before and then enter into how we feel about this particular topic here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So do you mind if I just lead us off?
Sure, please. So
the key to Crucial Conversations is to understand that it's easy for people to go quiet, to be silent if they're not comfortable with what they're feeling. Or the other extreme is to go be forceful. In other words, I want to convince you that you're wrong and I'm right, which is perceived as force. So the idea behind Crucial Conversations is to create mutual respect and have some kind of a shared purpose so that we're both trying to achieve at the same vision, whatever that might be. So I'd like to start off by just sharing what the emotions are from our heart. Got to be in our heart to do this. And let's check to see if we are in our hearts. Like, are we in our heads? Where is the energy that you're feeling that's causing you to, what did you say earlier? Where is that energy?
Are you referring to the energy of my resistance to this conversation, the way that I feel towards it?
Or the way you're like, I'm not sure I'm ready for this, but I'm feeling something, right?
Yeah, I feel it in my chest, my heart area, for sure.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So let's just share where we're coming from, what perspective we have, so everybody that's listening can, maybe identify with one versus the other.
Sure.
And then let's show everyone how we can work through this.
Okay.
You want to start?
Yeah, so what is the question or the frame? How shall I start?
How do you feel when this is brought up in the news or in the workplace about diversity and inclusion and what's being talked about in the news?
How do I feel when this subject comes up? I'd like to be clear that I love and am open to having discussions about it. I think what happens is what I've seen is people might jump to conclusions what other people feel, and then communication, like you said, either shuts down or gets more aggressive. It goes either way on the spectrum in the opposite direction of a united, shared vision of what we want to accomplish with the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I think where I feel the most resistance is that some people feel because of the appearance that they have or the physical characteristics that it invalidates their perspective because maybe they haven't suffered or been through something that somebody else might have been through. So I'm well aware I'm coming at this conversation from the perspective of a white male, but I already don't like that frame. I already have resistance to that because that is paying attention to something I have no control over. And I have value that I can offer in this conversation. I want to feel heard.
Okay, I hear you. So if I can share what I'm hearing is because you're a white male, when this subject comes up, you're feeling like you might not be heard in the discussion.
I feel like I'm already operating from a place of my perspective isn't as important because I can't relate to the suffering that somebody else might have experienced because of a characteristic that is out of their control as well.
Got it. Okay. Well, I'm a white male too. My perspective is when I think of diversity, I think of race, I think of religion, I think of sexuality. Those are the main topics, right? So whether you're Asian or black or some other religion, it could be Muslim, Jewish. I am Jewish. What comes up for me is the fear that if we aren't inclusive, if we don't treat everyone equally based on who they are, then we're going to create the environment that we've seen in the past, in history, which is that particular race or religion, they're the problem. And that's just can't be the truth. In my opinion, it can't be the truth. So how can we, as Dr. Hartman, who we both follow his teachings, how could good people follow evil? Right? And it starts with defining what is good. And if we don't define what is good, we are kind of drifting and we could follow someone who thinks what their definition of good is, but it might be to discriminate or to say that those people are a problem.
Yeah. Could I ask one quick qualifying question? Because I wrote something down I want to make sure we're on the same page about.
Yeah.
You said, could we see people equally based on who they are?
Yeah.
And what did you mean by that?
We're all different. We all have something unique to offer. Every one of us has a unique fingerprint. So by nature, we're all different.
Yeah. Well, I guess the reason I asked that is because when you say who they are, people may have a different way of defining that. And I guess what I want to make sure of is that I understand what you mean by that, because I don't really identify people by who they are on physical characteristics that they're born with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like I don't really I don't prefer to identify myself as a white male. Now that's a fact. That's who I am. Right. But it's not who I am. Does that make sense?
Correct. I agree. You're a spirit. Right.
I believe that. Other people might not believe that though, but I believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, we are unique. person that's here to create something new and creative. And we all are, whatever that is for us, whatever we love to do and get joy from, right?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify what you meant by who they are. Is that more geared towards like an essence, like more esoteric definition of that word, or how would you define?
Well, I'm just, I guess the definition of diversity, the way it's been presented in the news, is if you're have a different sexuality, or like let's say you're gay, or you're trans, or whatever that person identifies with, or your religion, or your race. Those are all diverse ways of labeling.
Labeling,
Right?
yes. Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
They're all labeling.
Yeah.
So
I think
would
that's
you
part of the
agree?
problem. I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that's part of the problem is our
Yeah,
propensity towards labeling and putting people in categories. I think that's
right.
the
Why do
right
we
out of
do
the gate.
that? Why do we do that? We do, though, right?
Yeah.
So my heart is what it feels is that we all need to be treated equally. And I do know that's the argument for not having diversity and inclusion, is we all need to be treated equally. Um, but if that isn't the way most people see others, if they don't see them equally, then that's where I think there's these two different polarized views, right?
I think you kind of just answered my question. So we see people equally, regardless of how we might categorize, quote unquote, or put them into a category.
Right,
Is that right? Okay. Yeah.
right. So it feels to me like the polarizing, um, where people break down in having a shared purpose, is one side feels that there shouldn't be any um, affirmative action or anything that benefits someone else because of who they are. If they're discriminated against, they shouldn't have anything other than what everyone else has, right?
Yeah. I feel like it's like a corrective approach for maybe a perception of an injustice in the past. Would that be an accurate
Right,
way to? Yeah.
right.
And I don't
So
know how relevant or important to point this out is, but I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court just struck down. That's the U.S.'s approach to that, but they struck down affirmative action. Is that right?
well, I think it's been I think it's in the states. That's where it's happening. I don't think it's the nation. So certain states that are Republican states are taking action to eliminate affirmative action.
Mm.
So that causes the polarization. So if I am one of those, if I'm Asian or black, and I am um, perceiving what does this mean to me, they're going to feel like, oh, well, that's doesn't feel good, because they feel like that the affirmative action was put in place when we were not able to treat them equally.
Hmm.
So it happened because, I don't know the exact history, but it happened because of discrimination, right?
Affirmative action happened because of discrimination. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying? Okay.
right. So, like, if you go back in history and you look at how certain people were discriminated against, these laws came out of that. because you can't change people,
Right.
right? Like if I'm racist, you're not going to force me to not be racist,
Mm.
right? We can't change anyone else. That's impossible. So the laws were put in place because there were a lot of racist people. Correct? I mean, isn't that sound right? Look at when just voting, like you when you were in the 60s and you were given the opportunity to vote, you had to, if you were black, you had to like fill out this test. And if you failed the test, you couldn't vote.
Mm.
So these laws were put in place because of if we didn't have the laws, there would be continued discrimination and discrimination and discrimination because you can't change people.
I believe I understand what you're saying. So these policies of affirmative action were put into place so that people could not discriminate.
So the law would solve that
Right. Okay.
for these people.
Sure.
So now the argument is, okay, we don't need it anymore. And I understand that argument, but who is the person that's going to judge that that's true or not?
Whether or not
Who,
it's necessary.
is
that
it
what
the
you're saying?
state that
Mm.
that is the one in charge of that? Oh, we don't need those laws anymore because there aren't any racists left.
Mm.
Who is the state to decide that?
Yeah, I feel like we're jumping to conclusions about something that might not necessarily be true. That's a good theory, and that might be partially right, but I don't know. I don't know
So
if
let's go to crucial conversations,
Okay.
which is, what do we both want? That's the way you start.
Sure.
So let's take turns. What I want is I want everyone to feel equal. I want everyone to have the same opportunities. That's what I want.
I want to, like when we have crucial conversations, we need to define that for each of us who are having the conversation, don't we? Or do we want to address what we want in a bigger capacity?
Well, the nature of a crucial conversation is that there needs to be some discussion about some conflict that's causing communication to break down.
Sure.
So if we have this discussion and one of us shuts down, then we can't have the flow of a dialogue towards a solution or a shared purpose.
And I think that's why I brought it up. I want to make sure that we're addressing what we want out of this conversation versus more of a macro desire for what the conversation is about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So why don't you state what that is for you?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's the same answer of what I shared in our episode number 99. I want to understand your perspective and why you see things the way you do. And I want to feel heard for why I might see things the way that I do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Which is not related to an outcome of the actual subject matter. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. So the way we can come together towards a shared purpose is if we define what is it that we want for ourselves. So we both want to be heard,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
What do we want for others? I want them to be heard, even if they disagree. So I want myself and others to be heard. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
So then we have to come up with, well, what is the mutual respect? How do we define mutual respect? So if someone disagrees, how do we show them mutual respect? In my view, it's not with it can't be with force.
Yeah.
Because that's not mutual respect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, maybe just an observation. I think I feel this way, so I'm sure others do, that when we enter into this conversation, I feel like I've thought through it and this is my ego coming up, but I have I don't want to say a right answer because I'm not looking to impart what I believe in on somebody else, but I feel an urge that when somebody else has an idea that I don't agree with, to like convince them, or to like I want them to be open to my perspectives and opinions and as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to be careful with that because it might not be the right frame to come into this with, and I might need to model more of me being curious about other people's perspectives to be able to practice that.
Yeah. So I think when you said you want to convince the other, I think that by definition of a crucial conversation, that shouldn't be the outcome. Because then one person's not going to be heard
Yeah.
if we're trying to make sure that they agree with us.
I think this is probably the most common problem having this conversation, is that so many people feel so strongly about their perspective that they don't
Right.
approach the conversation with an openness.
Yes. So
Yeah.
what do we know as coaches? What have we learned as coaches? And this is my perspective. When we feel a certain way, it doesn't mean that the reason we feel that way is being caused by other people.
Hmm.
Now, that can be the perception. You cause me to feel anger, or you cause me to feel unheard. Therefore, you have to change for me to be heard. Well, my truth is that isn't true. When we feel unheard and when we feel angry, that is because we feel unheard with ourselves and we feel angry towards ourselves.
Hmm.
And our ego is preventing us from feeling that, and we project that onto other people.
Hmm.
So I feel that that's the only way we're going to come together, is if we all do that work ourselves to understand, why do we feel angry? Why do we feel unheard? And if we listen to the news, which is telling us that the reason is because of others, there's no way we can come together.
I think we can all agree we need to stop listening to the news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that this is bringing up this to help us, right? Yeah. Everything does happen for a reason. And if we do feel unheard, then we need to take responsibility for how do we feel heard,
Yeah.
as opposed to, having someone agree with us. Right.
Yep.
So shared purpose with this discussion would be unity. That's what I'd want, where we can come together even if we disagree, and we could come up with some common sense solutions which do not require force. Because there's always going to be someone on top and someone on the bottom of force.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Force versus power, right?
You're right. Mm-hmm.
So that's what I want, is I want people to feel safe and not feel
so
they're bullied.
We spent almost 20 minutes of this conversation just framing out. So is it necessary to jump into the actual details of the conversation, or is this helpful enough to model?
I think we've addressed the reason for the polarization.
Sure.
And it's okay to feel what we feel, but I believe it's not okay to project that on others and to claim that they are the reason we're feeling this way. And so we all need to just chill out, deal with our own stuff, and agree on, how do we treat people fairly and equally in a society that is not necessarily tolerant of diversity. I think that's the challenge. if I want immigrants to leave, if I want um, to have some kind of a, take away the laws that protect discrimination, that is going to create an opposite thing. One's going to create an opposite force. So, does that make sense?
I think so. You said the laws that protect discrimination. Did you mean protect non-discrimination, or did you mean discrimination?
No, discrimination. Like, it's really almost like greed. Like, if you think about greed, we have laws in place. So if people are too greedy, they break the law. If those laws protect people from being taken advantage of, and I think we could all agree that's a good thing, because we can't control if somebody's going to be greedy and try to take your money in illegal ways. And we have laws in place to protect against discrimination. Same kind of principle. So if we take away all of these laws and put new laws in place, then who's to say that the greedy aren't going to get greedier, or the people that discriminate aren't going to get, they're just going to get away with more? That doesn't feel right. Is that, and I'm not trying to convince you, I'm just sharing where
I'm actually not sure that I'm clear on your perspective here. I'm hoping you can provide more details.
So when you think about some of the laws we have in place, if someone is going to take advantage of you, whether it be financially or, there's laws in place that says you can't steal from others, you can't do things illegally, which is trying to protect the playing field. If somebody's a bad actor, there's laws for that.
Right.
And we have laws in place if people are discriminated against, so that they aren't discriminated against. And if we take away those protections, then people are going to feel more that they can just get away with more bad, discriminating things. That it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what happened in history. If we just go back and look what's happened.
I may have a different perspective on that.
Okay, I want to hear it.
I think, first of all, I want to make sure I understand, because I'm still not quite sure. So I think what you're saying is, if we remove, what keeps coming up in my mind is affirmative action. Is that what you're referring to? So if we remove affirmative action, the thought is that the people will be greedy and practice segregation or discrimination again. Is that right?
I think there's a certain percentage of the population that will feel that they have a right to discriminate.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my perspective on that is that, maybe we need to define what affirmative action is, so we're on the same page. But I don't know how I can get on board with a policy that is like a corrective policy based on physical attributes to correct something like discrimination that is based on physical attributes. How could you say, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it should, my view is that it should be based on merit. And if we're paying attention to something else that's more of a feature of somebody, we want to make sure that we have enough Asians, regardless of whether or not they've earned it. I don't know if I can get on board with that.
Yeah, and that creates this divide. I hear you.
Well, and I think when you talk about power and force, what's to be said about the forcefulness of affirmative action? I need to hit a metric of a certain qualification of a person, sexuality, gender, religion, whatever, in order for me to not be penalized. I actually don't even know what the penalty is of affirmative action or not complying with it. But am I clear?
Yeah, no, I think you're representing that that argument that says, why would you penalize me if I'm white by having a quota system for
Uh,
non-whites?
I think that's too big of a leap. That's not what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying, why would we base um, entry into a university, for example? That's what I'm thinking
Right.
of. Based on anything but have I earned it? Are my grades good enough? Am I qualified? Have I earned
Mm-hmm.
GPA, etc.? And I guess a result could be that I might miss out, but that's not really what I'm thinking of. I'm just thinking of the principle of assigning a policy based on physical attributes to correct somebody's discrimination based on physical attributes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we are going to run out of time.
Yeah, we might have to do a part 2 to this episode here
Yeah, I
because I
think
think
we need to
we're
do
getting
part
into
two.
the juice and the meat here
Yeah,
of the
right.
divergence, and I think we want to practice the
Right.
crucial conversation
Yeah.
exercise here. Yeah.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, it almost feels like empty to leave it there, but let's pick up where we left off again real soon. We'll have a part 2 here.
Sounds good.
All right, you maybe notice different wardrobe, different clothes being worn. This is part 2 of our episode being recorded 1 week later. And Coach Z and I, we did this in the original recording, and I think we just did it again to where we just kind of recentered and identified what we want to do with our conversation today. And I think I just wrote down 3 things, John, so just let me know if I have these all correct. First, we want to understand, or we want to express ourselves and the way that we feel about this topic. Number 2 is that we want to understand each other's perspectives and respect that. And then by the end, we'd like to, maybe number 3, come up with a shared purpose of what we do with that. Instead of drifting further apart, how can we be united even if we have different perspectives with how we move forward?
Totally agree. That's a good intention for the rest of today.
Okay.
So who wants to start with how to express ourselves authentically?
Yeah, I think we began to do that near the end of last week's recording, so I'm open to yielding the floor if you'd like to go first.
So the topic is affirmative action. Is that correct?
Yeah, we originally said
inclusion.
Yeah, it was geared towards that latter, equity and inclusion. Actually, I think what were the 2 words? It was diversity,
equity, and inclusion.
And you left out equity, I think, the first time, or
No,
inclusion.
they're always
maybe
kind of put together.
Okay, diversity, equity,
right.
and inclusion.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's how I always hear it in the news.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my perspective on it is that it's a good thing, not a bad thing. But I do understand that a lot of people feel strongly the other way. So I'm not saying that perspective is wrong. I'm just saying it appeals more to me to value the human being. So those that have been persecuted or discriminated against, whatever group they might be, then they feel like, hey, this isn't fair, right? I don't have a fair shot. And therefore, it's my belief that the laws that have been in place were trying to address, trying to make it a little more of a level playing field. It's not up to the law to force people to do something they don't want to do. But if there aren't safeguards in place, then the bad actors can get away with a lot. And that's kind of why I side with the, whatever you want to call them, protections, or I guess protections are a good word. And coming from my faith, being Jewish, in the back of my mind, uh, there was a time and place when really in a matter of like a year, everything turned from Jews being accepted to not being accepted. And then of course they didn't have any rights. They were all taken away from them. So how do you put some safeguards in the law so that you can't do that? I mean that's like insane. Right? That's where I'm coming from.
Gotcha. Okay. Are you referring with that last part to Nazi Germany? Is that because there's several times in human history where Jewish people
Yeah,
have
I
been
mean, most
prosecuted?
recently Nazi Germany, where I was just watching this Ken Burns thing about the Holocaust. Oh my God, it's just I can't get enough of it because I'm learning about history. And unfortunately, when I watch it, it seems like we're doing the same stuff in the background.
Okay, I want to make sure, I want to practice number 2 here and make sure I heard you correctly. I want to understand your perspectives here. So I wrote down a few notes. What I heard was that the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a good thing and not a bad thing. That's how you perceive,
Correct.
knowing that some other people might not agree with that or see it differently,
Correct.
but that's how you see it, because it values the human being.
Mm-hmm.
And there are laws that try to make a level playing field to prevent bad actors from taking advantage of it and discriminating. Is that right?
Correct.
And the laws could be categorized under affirmative action, or that's maybe one example of
Yeah,
laws?
that's it.
Okay.
That's an example. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, and if not in place, then bad actors can get away with stuff. Okay. And what else? Anything else?
No, that's where I'm coming from.
It's hard to argue that it would be a bad thing to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that's what it's sort of, it's all relative, right? So if we're talking about diversity of thought and ideas, and like the more viewpoints that we have with anything, the better off we are, is my belief system.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at as much risk of people taking advantage of affirmative action policies as not having them. So there could be bad actors with DEI, for example.
True.
And I'm concerned about the overall frame of looking at things through the lens of how you would calculate diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does that mean? Does that mean race? Does that mean gender? And are we using data to get to an end result that moves away from this? This is maybe more of a buzzword, but I want to explore this as well. I think there's a difference between opportunity and results, right? Equality of opportunity. I agree, right? Everybody should have the same opportunities that other people have, if we can make it so. Versus equality of outcomes. On paper, white people are 60%, whereas another race is less than that, 40%. We'll say there's 2 races. All right. My concern is that we jump to conclusions that the final number is not equal, so something must be wrong. Whereas if we're measuring in any sort of hierarchy, right, there are, on this level or this side of the spectrum, there's some people who are more productive, some are less. And does it have to end with equality versus opportunity? I don't know if I'm articulating that right. Does that make sense the way that I said it?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand, but I do understand where you're coming from. Your concern, if I can restate it, is that the affirmative action laws can be gamed. and that creates unfairness. I'm sure that's true. I mean,
Right.
I can see that in certain areas. I'm sure that's true. But for me, if we can't change people, and that's the underlying assumption is the serenity prayer. We cannot change other people. The only thing we can do is change ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing we have within our power is to change our perception. Are we valuing the human being? Are we including diversity of thought in our lives? Are we including diversity of thought and just differences in our world? Because fundamentally, we are all a little bit unique. Every single one of us, even if we're all the same race, we're all a little bit unique. Like we have a different fingerprint. We're made slightly unique. So that being true, I don't think anyone can argue that's true.
I think a lot of people would actually. That's
Fingerprints are all the same.
Know that because you belong to a certain race, gender, ethnicity, that you act a certain way, or you do things a certain way, or you have tendencies.
No, I'm not saying that we do. I'm saying we are all unique.
No, I know. I'm saying other people would think that what I just said, that they would lump people. That's the definition of discrimination, right? Like that you are this way, so you act this way, or you're more likely to act this way.
There are definitely bad actors in every race.
Right.
Right? Totally agree with that. So shouldn't the laws protect the good actors, no matter what race they're in? Isn't that the whole purpose? Is we want to protect the people that are law-abiding, that are not criminals, that are not gaming the system. We want to give them protection against the bad actors, no matter what race, sexuality they are. Right?
I would agree with that. I guess I don't know what a law would look like that would successfully be able to pull that off.
I don't know either, but I think that is where we come together. If we can both agree that there are bad actors in every race, there are bad actors in every religion, right? What are the things we differ on? Whatever those are, there are bad actors in each one of those groups.
Agreed.
So going back to Dr. Hartman, what is good? We have to define, we have to be intentional about what the concept of good is. And if we don't do that, we can't measure it. So for me, what is good is we provide protections to those that are following the law, that are not taking advantage of others by force, whether that be guns, slavery, whatever that might look like, human trafficking, whatever that force is. That's a bad actor.
Right.
And when we force people to do things, that's wrong. Right?
Yeah, it's ironical though that you're saying that. So your solution is to force people to do things.
No, I agree. We're not trying to force people, but if there are bad actors,
force them,
that decide they want to discriminate, and they don't want a certain race, they don't want to even deal with them. They don't want them in their business. They don't, or a certain sexuality. Well, all of those people are not bad actors. There's a lot of good people in those groups.
Sure.
So how do we come up with a solution where we give some protections for the good people, so that someone can't come along, change the laws so that all of a sudden one day, oh, well, everyone in that race, you're evil. So I guess it's okay to turn our backs and shoot everybody. That's what happened. because somebody said it was true. How do we protect ourselves from that? I don't think we're that far away from that happening again.
Mm.
That's where I'm
Yeah.
coming from. It's emotional. I can't take the emotion out.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I have some concern about that. That's the right way to do it. I think that there is a perspective that says in the grand public marketplace of like, I think we're at a point in time right now where if the greater part of the population knew and observed discrimination, we're all in agreement that that's ridiculous to base somebody's skill level or aptitude on a physical attribute that they have. Like that's the vast majority of the population.
But it happens every day.
Right. So what I'm saying is,
it literally happened, and it's in the shadows.
right.
That's why it's so hard to change. Like, you watch these videos of, I think, good cops, well-meaning cops, and then they pull over a black person, and then in 10 minutes it escalates. And how the hell did that happen? And it should have never happened, but
Right.
it does, because we are not aware of our prejudices. They're in our shadows, and they come out under stress. We know this as coaches. We can't control it when our anger gets triggered. We can't
Right.
control it when our rage gets triggered. And this is what's happening in our world. And it's not fair to blame one group or another. We're all guilty. But we're not, the discrimination and its prejudice is still really bad.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I guess I'm glad you brought that example up, because that's not the way I'm thinking of like business or like universities who are, going through admissions or tuition, or, more particularly
I
admissions.
hear you on that.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, I had the effect of reverse discrimination because I grew up in a wealthy neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I was applying to college. And because I lived in a certain zip code, it was much harder for me to get admitted to the business school at the University of Illinois than it was someone in rural Illinois.
Right.
Much different. So I understand the reverse of it.
Well, what do you think of that?
I couldn't get into the business school.
Yeah. So is that a necessary casualty, or is there like an injustice that needs to be?
That's a good question. I think the law was well intended. I don't think it was designed to discriminate against me.
Sure.
Right. So I took it that way. And I think the argument that we have now, my bias is, I think the what's happening on the airwaves is trying to create division.
Oh, yeah.
When there
100%.
shouldn't be. We should be actually talking about this like we are, and coming up with novel ideas, which is more around the lines of education, and especially with the shadow.
Yeah.
Because until we understand how our ego projects onto other people, we will never solve this dilemma of discrimination.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the real solution, right? Is to do that work ourselves.
Of course. I think there's maybe some divergence of perspectives on the policies and the potential good that it does. I think we agree on, as is always the case, right? 90% or more that there's bad actors, right? There needs to be something done. So yeah, maybe that's where we go next, is like, what do we do about it? And I think what we're saying is that we need to create forums, environments to where these conversations are happening, Because what happens usually is that communication shuts down, right? And people, you're not listening to me.
Silence or
I disagree with you. Yep.
Right.
So that's the opportunity. I think the biggest opportunity is when you see it happening.
You say something.
Yeah. And you reach out,
Yeah,
which is very
that's
courageous,
tough.
not
That's
easy to
hard.
do. Yes.
That's hard. So how do we train our youth? Like you are very much about the youth with hockey, and you're working with schools in terms of coaching the teachers and the administration. That's where we need to. That's our best hope, is to get to the kids and the parents. And I'm game if you have an opportunity for me to participate in that.
Yeah. Definitely. I'm certain there will be opportunities, or there are currently opportunities to do that.
And I think maybe it's up to us, because we do represent maybe a different side. When we see someone on our side who's blaming the other side, we need to say no. Because the blame is not the other person. We can only work on ourselves.
Yeah, I maybe just had some questions pop up with, what do you mean our side? Our company, our...
Well, whoever is the spokesperson for, trying to either keep affirmative action or to abolish it.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Those are the polarizing sides.
Right.
The solution's always in the middle somewhere. It's never black and white.
Yeah, it's a spectrum.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and I think we desire, I believe, the end result. I guess that's where I was maybe diverging a little bit, is that are the policies that we're even talking about going to yield the results that we want?
No, I don't think there's any question they won't. I think education's the only solution. But the education we've tried to use, the way we've tried to educate, hasn't worked.
Yeah.
I think that's where we need to focus our attention, is how do we teach what projection is in the schools? How do we teach what the ego is in the schools? How do we teach that stuff? The tools that we use.
Yeah.
How does that get taught? Up until I became a coach, I had no clue what projection was.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way.
I was 55 years old.
Yeah.
And I thought I was self-aware. Everyone thinks they're self-aware. Right?
Yeah. There's always more to be aware of, though.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's our responsibility, not even, but maybe especially since we've discovered this late in life, or later in life, to be able to help to bring people along earlier in their lives, wherever that may be.
So I do have to go, but maybe the idea for the next time is to think about how we help one person who is not aware of their shadow of prejudice, and we help them with the tools of self-awareness. And then once they go through that, it'll be interesting to see, how do you perceive this subject any differently than before?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to continue talking about this, maybe a part 3 on another episode. Yeah.
Okay.
Coach
Thanks,
Z,
Coach.
Thank you. Absolutely. Talk again soon.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction, so please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links to our masterclass, The Achiever's Mindset, and come join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.